I know, you're right. Geo sucks ass. Just look at the absolute state of Geo right now. Navia hasn't even released yet and she's already crying. It has been a very well-known issue that Geo is not in the best state right now. Besides Zhongli, no one really uses Geo characters. The only reason people even use Zhongli is because of his massive shield that gives you infinite resistance to interruption. The Abyss usage for Geo characters across the board is pretty abysmal. People are using Kujo Sara more than Arataki Ito. Who the f uses Kujo Sara? But why is the usage rate for Geo characters so low? Why is Geo such a terrible element? A lot of people speculate that it is due to Geo not really having any elemental reactions. But the thing is, Anemo also doesn't really have any reactions. The only one it has is Swirl. Geo actually has 2 elemental reactions, that being Crystallize and Shatter. Even though Geo has more elemental reactions, there are still 3 Anemo characters with decent usage rates and Kazuha, who is just an absolute mad lad at the top. One of the main differences between these 2 elements is that Anemo has the stupidly broken artifact set Viridescent Venner, while Geo only has Archaic Petra. When looking at the effects of these 2 artifact sets, it looks like they serve a similar purpose. But because Geo is supposed to be a more defensive element, they tone down how much of a damage boost you can get with the Petra artifact set. They make it so that you can only get a damage buff from one element as opposed to being able to lower the resistance of multiple elements at the same time. Now, I can see what the design team was probably going for here. Anemo and Geo were supposed to be elements that could work as a flex pick that could be slotted into most teams. And the thing is, that actually does sound like it describes Anemo, but why doesn't it sound like it describes Geo? I don't think that Geo as an element is a terrible concept. I actually think that Geo is designed pretty well if Genshin Impact as a game was designed in a different way. The shields can tank a bit of the damage that you might take, and multiple Geo characters can give you resistance to interruption in some way. The problem with Geo is that Genshin's endgame content, the Spiral Abyss, is just a glorified time attack mode. In this mode, the only thing that matters is defeating all of the enemies on a floor as fast as you can, while having at least one character from your party still alive on each side. That's it. So the meta of Genshin Impact has revolved around how much damage you can do. How fast can you slay everything that is on the field? When you are only looking to do as much damage as possible, why would you give up damage for a bit of bulk when it isn't necessary to have it? Now, utility is still important in Genshin Impact, but only if that utility helps you do more damage. Take a look at Kazuha. He is a character that can instantly pull in every enemy close to each other so that you can damage every enemy at the same time instead of having to individually attack each enemy. More damage. A character like Xingqiu, who not only deals a good amount of damage on his own, but he also applies an insane amount of Hydro. And what does more Hydro application allow you to do? It allows you to proc more elemental reactions like Vaporize and Hyperbloom. Therefore, ergo, vis-a-vis, I say this to say, more damage. Everybody knows, bigger number, better person. That's how the world works. But Geo doesn't have any offensive reactions, and it doesn't have crowd control capabilities like Anemo does. Geo does have defensive utility, sure, but the only Geo character that gives you more damage indirectly is Zhongli, and that's why people still use him. See, if you are having to stop your offense in order to dodge the enemy's attacks, that means that you aren't doing damage. But let's say if you had this massive shield that allowed you to just tank all the hits and continue your offense, then that would be more damage. But also, side note, Zhongli also just makes the game super comfy to play. So once you've been building your characters in your account for a year or longer, then you can actually pretty easily 36-star the Abyss still, even with just 3 characters. So a lot of people will just slot Zhongli in just so that they don't really have to dodge the enemy's attacks, and then they can still just 36-star the Abyss. But back to my point, that's part of the reason why people will still use Zhongli, but they don't really use any other Geo character. I believe that this is the main reason why Geo isn't a popular pick, and it's probably the reason why we haven't gotten a single Geo character since January 2022. It's been almost 2 years since our last Geo character, Yunjin. But in 1 week as of the time I'm recording, that all changes. In 1 week's time, we will be getting a brand new 5-star Geo character. Navia will single-handedly fix everything. Navia will be the savior of Geo. Okay, let's be real here. I don't think that it is possible for one single character to save Geo in its current state. Even if Navia was insanely broken, she releases and her elemental skill does like 1,000,000 damage at level 1 with 0 artifacts, that would be insane. Everybody would definitely roll for her. But all that would mean is that Hoyoverse didn't know how to balance Navia. It wouldn't fix the actual problem. And the problem is that Geo feels like it is supposed to be this defensive class, but the way that Genshin is designed, there is no need to be tanky. As long as you have enough health to not get one-shot by an enemy in the Abyss, you can just heal yourself back up. The Spiral Abyss is the only endgame, and all that matters in the Abyss is more damage. And that sucks, because Geo is my favorite element. It is the only element that allows you to create solid structures on field. These Geo constructs can give your team buffs or even block incoming projectiles. Being able to manipulate the battlefield in order to turn the tides in your favor is inherently interesting. Geo characters giving varying buffs that can help your team depending on what it needs is an amazing idea. I see the vision. I see what they were trying to do, and that's why it's so frustrating. Because the buffs and structures aren't enough compared to what you are having to give up. Geo characters were supposed to be a defensive option that could be slotted into a team as a flex pick. But the defensive option is always worse because to balance it out, the defensive option has to do less damage. But as we established, the way that Genshin has designed its gameplay, damage is the only thing that matters. Let's say you're building a Hu Tao Vape team. Great. You got your Hydra unit and you've got a shield from Zhongli for some comfy gameplay. Then you throw in an Albedo. Amazing. Albedo does off-field damage, and on top of that, when you burst with Albedo, that increases your elemental mastery so you can get bigger Vape damage. Brilliant. Except Yelan does more damage. And this is the biggest flaw when it comes to the Geo element. It seems like there is always another character that you can slot in place of a Geo character that allows you to reach a higher damage ceiling. The minor buffs that you receive from Geo characters aren't enough of an incentive for you to use them over a different character. That is why, even though it feels like Geo is supposed to be a more flexible unit, most people just end up running mono Geo. Outside of niche instances like Yunjin with Yoimiya, this is usually what you end up running if you are playing a Geo character at all. You usually pick these three as your main core because Goro buffs defense and Geo damage, which both Ito and Albedo scale with. You can also run Noelle in place of Ito, but most people prefer to run Ito because even though Noelle can also be a healer, at the end of the day, Arataki Ito has a higher damage ceiling because of his 5-star scalings. 5 stars is more than 4 stars. Bigger number, better person. We already know this. It sucks that even in this instance, even when we are comparing two Geo characters together, it still just comes down to how much damage you can do. But the reason why people are so concerned with damage is because there isn't as much skill expression in Genshin as some other games. It's not like in a fighting game where there is infinite room for skill expression. There's no Zato from Guilty Gear where I'm like, wait, I have to basically control 2 characters at the same time? I don't know how to do that. Oh my god, how's he doing that? Oh my god! That's why there isn't as big of an incentive to pick a character that does less damage. It's not like these gacha characters end up feeling like an extension of yourself like how they do in a fighting game. So that's why most of the time people are only concerned with more damage. But there is this cool mechanic that only Geo characters have. That's why I think Geo constructs are such a cool idea. They are a huge reason why I love Geo, but Hoyoverse isn't expanding on them at all because they are only releasing one Geo character every 2 years. Geo constructs could be way more badass than they actually are, but most of the time they are just a nuisance. These structures just don't do enough for how big of a hindrance they can be. The Geo Traveler's rocks are annoying. I think that we can all agree on that. That's why people won't even bother using the Geo Traveler, because having those things on field can separate enemies, they can pop the enemies on top of it, and this can make it more difficult to clear the Spiral Abyss in a timely manner. But imagine if you got plus 10% crit damage for each rock you had on the field. Suddenly, you don't really care that these rocks could get in the way. Now, don't you suddenly want to keep as many rocks on the field as possible? I think that there are 2 things that distinguish Geo characters from other elements. The first thing is that every Geo character naturally feels more sturdy because you have the crystallized reaction, and a lot of Geo characters can provide some resistance and interruption in some way. I think that Hoyoverse has actually been making some enemies recently that have the potential to one-shot you with one combo. The Consecrated Beasts and the Coppelia boss, when in the Abyss, do an insane amount of damage. These enemies specifically can eat your entire health bar in an instant. So it does actually make Geo characters that have a higher defense feel better against these specific enemies. So I think that these new enemy types might be a way to showcase how sturdy Geo characters can feel, and I think it's a decent way to highlight one of the things that sets Geo apart. Will they continue to make more and more enemies that can one-shot you to make Geo a bit more meta? Who can say? Even right now, like, Geo's definitely not meta. Just look at these charts. The second thing is Geo constructs. I think that having that aspect of comfy gameplay is great for Geo characters, but that unfortunately doesn't help Geo clear the Spiral Abyss any faster. Going forward, if they wanted to start improving the Geo element and expand upon what I think stands out about Geo, I think that they should lean into Geo constructs. They could design Geo units with Geo constructs in mind, and they could even have a character give buffs based on how many Geo constructs are on field at any given time. They could create a construct similar to Ningguang's Jade Screen that lowers the opponent's defense if you can get them to walk through it. You can have a Geo character summon an Earth Golem that fights at your side and also counts as a Geo construct. You could have an elemental skill with a long cooldown that creates a large Geo construct that does a bit of damage and slowly produces white energy particles for your team, but it also taunts enemies into attacking the structure. If you let the enemies break the structure before it's done giving off the max amount of energy, then you lose out on the particles that you could have gotten. I don't know. There are a lot of things that you could do with Geo constructs, but we have to wait and see if Hoyoverse ever does anything with them. Navia is going to be coming out soon. Her kit was revealed, and it looks like she doesn't have anything to do with Geo constructs, unfortunately. She still looks amazing. She is definitely going to be fun to play, plus her weapon is an axe, and that's badass. I currently have over 35,000 Primo Gems saved for her and her weapon, so I'm definitely going for both of them. Hopefully, Hoyoverse does something with Geo in the future. But thank you very much for watching the entire video if you did. And just remember, you don't have to believe in yourself. Believe in me. Believe in the me that believes in you. And I'll see you in the next video.